The conference room was silent except for the soft hum of the holographic projector. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at one end of the long table, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the alien delegates materialize before her. The beings that appeared were unlike anything most humans had ever seen in person, though their images had filled news broadcasts for weeks. The Zephyrian representative was the most imposing. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, its crystalline body caught the artificial light and scattered it in rainbow patterns across the walls. Its voice came through the universal translator as a series of musical chimes that somehow conveyed both authority and contempt. "People of Earth," the Zephyrian began, its faceted head turning to examine each human delegate in turn. "We come before you today not as conquerors, but as civilizers. The galactic hegemony has observed your species for 3 of your centuries. We have watched your endless conflicts, your senseless violence, your primitive tribalism. We have seen enough." Ambassador Chen felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her expression neutral. Around the table, representatives from every major Earth nation sat in uncomfortable silence. The Secretary-General of the United Nations, Maria Vasquez, gave Chen a small nod. This was the moment they had all been dreading. The reptilian delegate, a creature that looked like a giant lizard wearing ornate robes, stepped forward. "Your species shows promise," it hissed through forked tongue. "You have achieved faster-than-light travel. You have colonized several star systems, but you remain dangerous, unstable, a threat to galactic peace. We have reviewed your history," added a third alien, this one appearing as a floating jellyfish surrounded by a bubble of luminescent gas. "Thousands of years of warfare, genocide, nuclear weapons, chemical warfare, biological weapons. No civilized species behaves this way." Chen finally spoke, her voice steady despite the churning in her stomach. "With respect, honored delegates, humanity has also shown remarkable capacity for growth, cooperation, and peace. We have united our world. We have worked together to explore the stars. We have a..." "Silence." The Zephyrian's voice cut through hers like ice. "You speak of unity, yet your colonial fleets maintain military escorts. You speak of peace, yet every human ship we have encountered carries enough firepower to destroy a city. You speak of cooperation, yet your first response to discovering other species was to build more weapons." The holographic display in the center of the table shifted, showing images that made several human delegates wince. Battle footage from Mars, the defense platforms around Jupiter, the massive shipyards orbiting Neptune where humanity had been building its fleet. "This ends now," the reptilian continued. "The galactic hegemony, representing 12 advanced civilizations and over 400 billion sentient beings, offers humanity a choice. Submit to our guidance, accept our protection, become a client species under our benevolent rule. Your aggressive tendencies will be managed. Your military will be disbanded. Your weapons will be destroyed. In return, you will be granted the knowledge and technology to truly join galactic civilization." Secretary-General Vasquez leaned forward. "And if we refuse?" The silence that followed was deafening. The aliens exchanged glances that somehow conveyed volumes of meaning, despite their vastly different biologies. "No species has ever refused," the jellyfish-like being said finally. "The offer is generous beyond measure. To reject it would be unthinkable." "But hypothetically," Chen pressed, her diplomatic training taking over even as her heart pounded, "what would happen if Earth chose to maintain its independence?" The Zephyrian's crystalline form seemed to grow brighter, more intense. "Hypothetically, such a decision would represent a clear threat to galactic stability. The hegemony would have no choice but to take decisive action to protect the galaxy from a dangerous, warlike species." Admiral James Morrison, who had been silent until now, spoke up from his position near the back of the human delegation. "You're talking about genocide." "We prefer the term pacification," the reptilian replied without emotion, "though the distinction may be academic." The weight of the moment settled over the room like a physical force. Chen looked around at her fellow humans, seeing the same mixture of shock, anger, and fear in every face. They had known this moment might come. Ever since humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel and begun expanding into the galaxy, xenobiologists and political scientists had warned that contact with alien civilizations might not go as the optimists hoped. "How long do we have to consider your generous offer?" Vasquez asked, her voice carefully controlled. 30 of your standard days, the Zephyrian announced. This is more than generous. Most primitive species are given far less time to accept the inevitable. The holographic aliens began to flicker as the transmission prepared to end. The reptilian spoke one final time. Use this time wisely. Consult with your leaders. Review your history. Consider the alternatives. The hegemony has brought peace to countless worlds. We offer you the same gift. And remember, the jellyfish creature added, resistance is not merely futile. It is barbaric. Civilized beings do not choose destruction over enlightenment. The holograms vanished, leaving the human delegates alone in the suddenly too quiet conference room. For several long moments, nobody spoke. The weight of the ultimatum hung in the air like smoke. Admiral Morrison was the first to break the silence. Well, he said grimly, that went about as well as expected. Chen turned to face the assembled representatives of humanity. We need to contact every colony world, every orbital station, every ship in the fleet. This decision affects all of humanity, not just Earth. They're giving us 30 days, Vasquez said, her voice hollow. 30 days to choose between slavery and extinction. Those aren't the only choices, Morrison replied, his weathered face set in hard lines. They seem to think they know everything about us, but I wonder if they've really studied human history as closely as they claim. What do you mean? Chen asked. Morrison stood up, his military bearing evident in every line of his body. They see our weapons and our wars and think they understand us. They think we're just another primitive species that will roll over when faced with superior force. But they're missing something important, which is, they don't understand why we fought all those wars in the first place. They see the violence, but they don't see what we were fighting for. Freedom, independence, the right to determine our own destiny. Morrison's eyes hardened. And any species that thinks humanity will quietly accept slavery doesn't know us at all. The Secretary General nodded slowly. So we're really going to do this? We're going to reject their ultimatum? Chen looked around the room one more time, seeing the same grim determination on every face. We need to vote. Every nation, every colony, every human outpost gets a say. But somehow I don't think this is going to be a difficult decision. As the delegates began filing out to contact their respective governments, Chen remained behind, staring at the empty space where the alien holograms had been. 30 days. 30 days to prepare for what might be humanity's final war. But as she thought about humanity's long, bloody, stubborn history of fighting for freedom against impossible odds, Ambassador Sarah Chen found herself smiling. The aliens thought they knew humans. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when you cornered the descendants of apes who had fought their way from caves to stars. The vote was unanimous, not just among Earth's nations, though that had been expected, not just among the Mars colonies, though they had always been fiercely independent. The vote was unanimous across every human settlement in the galaxy, from the ice miners of Europa to the deep space research stations orbiting distant stars. 30 billion humans, scattered across 47 star systems, had spoken with one voice. No. Admiral Morrison stood in the war room deep beneath the European Space Coalition headquarters, watching the final tally appear on the massive display screens. The numbers kept updating as votes came in from the most distant colonies, but the pattern had been clear from the first day. Humanity would not bow. The aliens are monitoring our communications, reported Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Secretary General's daughter and head of the Intelligence Division. They seem confused by our response. Confused how? Morrison asked, not taking his eyes off the strategic displays showing human fleet positions throughout known space. Their intercepted communications suggest they expected some resistance from Earth, maybe a few of the more militaristic colonies, but they can't understand why even the peaceful research stations and agricultural worlds are voting to fight. Elena pulled up a decoded alien transmission. Listen to this. The universal translator rendered the Zephyrian communication into flat, emotionless words. The human's behavior defies all statistical models. Agricultural worlds show no military value. Research stations possess no strategic importance. Yet they vote for extinction over assimilation. This cannot be rational. Morrison allowed himself a grim smile. They don't understand us at all, do they? No, sir. They see individual colonies making individual decisions and think we're a loose confederation of independent worlds. They don't realize that an attack on one human settlement is seen as an attack on all humanity. The door to the war room hissed open, and Ambassador Chen entered with President Martinez of the American Federation and Prime Minister Singh of the Indo-European Union. Behind them came representatives from every major Earth power, their faces bearing the same mixture of determination and grim resolve. "The hegemony has responded to our rejection," Chen announced without preamble. "They're giving us one final chance to reconsider. Apparently they believe we might change our minds once we see their fleet." The main display shifted to show long-range sensor data from the outer solar system. What they saw made several of the politicians gasp. Ships, hundreds of them, emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the Kuiper Belt. Each vessel was massive, easily 10 times the size of humanity's largest battleships. "Jesus Christ," whispered President Martinez. "How many?" 843 confirmed, Elena reported. "Still counting. Multiple ship classes from all 12 hegemony species. We're seeing Zephyrian crystal ships, reptilian bioships, gaseous cloud vessels, and at least 9 other distinct technologies." Prime Minister Singh studied the display with the eye of someone who had once been a military officer. "What's their combined firepower?" "Enough to sterilize every planet in the solar system," Morrison replied bluntly. "Maybe twice." The room fell silent as the implication sank in. They were facing the combined military might of a galactic civilization that had conquered hundreds of worlds. Humanity's entire fleet consisted of maybe 200 ships, most of them designed for patrol duty and exploration rather than military action. "Sir," Elena said quietly, "we're receiving another transmission from the hegemony fleet. Put it through." The Zephyrian commander appeared as a hologram in the center of the room. This one was different from the diplomat they had met before, equal larger, more angular, with crystalline formations that pulsed with aggressive red light. "Humans of Earth," the alien began, its translated voice carrying undertones of condescension mixed with annoyance. "I am Fleet Commander Zarthul of the Hegemony Pacification Force. I arrived to find that you have somehow convinced yourselves to reject the generous offer of civilization. This is unprecedented, troubling, but not irreversible." The hologram gestured, and the display showed tactical information about the alien fleet, clearly intended to intimidate. "Observe our strength. 800 ships carrying the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. Shield technologies that can withstand the output of stars. Weapons that can crack planetary crusts. We have not needed to use our full military capability in over 3,000 years, because no species has been foolish enough to resist us." Morrison stepped forward. "Then why are you still talking instead of shooting?" The alien's crystalline head tilted in what might have been surprise. You wish us to begin the pacification immediately? I'm wondering why you're trying so hard to convince us to surrender if victory is so certain," Morrison replied. "In my experience, people who are confident in their strength don't usually spend this much time explaining how strong they are." The Zephyrian's form flickered, the red light pulsing faster. "Your primitive psychology attempts to apply human motivation to advanced civilizations. We offer you one final opportunity for enlightenment because we are civilized. We prefer not to destroy when we can educate." Ambassador Chen spoke up. "And if we still refuse?" "Then you will be pacified. Your ships will be destroyed, your military eliminated, your planetary defenses neutralized. But the bulk of your population will be preserved for integration into civilized society. This is more mercy than any primitive species has a right to expect." President Martinez had been studying the alien fleet deployment on the tactical displays. "Commander Zarthul, may I ask you a question?" "Speak." "In all your years of civilizing, how many species have you faced that actually wanted to fight?" Another pause. "This question is irrelevant. The outcome remains unchanged regardless of desire to resist. Humor me." The alien seemed to consider this. "Most species submit immediately upon seeing our fleet. Others require a demonstration of our power, the destruction of a single military installation or uninhabited world. Only a handful have required actual pacification, and these were quickly overwhelmed by our technological superiority." "So you've never actually fought a real war," Morrison observed. "You've conducted police actions against opponents who were either unwilling to fight or incapable of fighting effectively." "We have brought peace to the galaxy for millennia," the Zephyrian replied, its tone becoming more agitated. "Our methods are proven. Our victory is inevitable." Singh leaned forward. "Commander, Has it occurred to you that there might be a difference between a species that doesn't want to fight and a species that chooses to fight? This distinction is meaningless. Primitive emotions cannot overcome technological reality. Chen exchanged glances with Morrison. The Admiral nodded slightly. Commander Zarthul, Chen said formally, by authority of the United Earth Government and with the full support of all human colonies and settlements, I hereby inform you that humanity officially rejects the hegemony's ultimatum. We will not submit. We will not surrender, and we will not be conquered. The silence that followed stretched for nearly a full minute. The alien's crystalline form seemed to dim, then brighten again. This is irrational. You face extinction. We face a choice, Morrison corrected. Freedom or slavery. Death or submission. Humanity has faced this choice before. Many times throughout our history, we have never chosen slavery. Then you choose extinction. We choose to fight, Chen replied. And, Commander, when your species writes the history of this war, remember that you were warned. You've spent 3,000 years pacifying species that didn't want to fight. Now you're about to discover what happens when you threaten a species that does. The hologram vanished without another word. In the silence that followed, Elena pulled up another set of displays. Sir, we're getting reports from all human settlements. Fleet units are moving to predetermined positions. Colonial militias are activating. The shipyards are switching to full military production. Morrison studied the strategic map showing the positions of human forces throughout the galaxy. To anyone else, it would have looked hopeless. Tiny clusters of ships scattered across vast distances, facing a concentrated alien fleet that outnumbered them 4-1. But Morrison saw something different. He saw a species that had evolved from pack hunters, that had learned to coordinate across vast distances, that had turned their predatory instincts toward the protection of their own kind. Elena, send a message to all fleet commanders, he ordered. Phase 1 is now active. It's time to show the galaxy what humans do to anyone stupid enough to threaten our families. As the war room erupted into controlled activity, Morrison allowed himself one last look at the alien fleet positioning itself for what they thought would be an easy victory. They had studied human history, but they had completely misunderstood what they were looking at. They saw warfare and thought they were looking at primitive aggression. They didn't realize they were looking at the most sophisticated military doctrine ever developed. The accumulated wisdom of a species that had spent 10,000 years learning how to kill anything that threatened the pack. The hegemony was about to receive a very expensive education. Fleet Commander Zarthul floated in the center of his command ship's bridge, watching the tactical displays with growing confusion. 3 hours had passed since the humans' final rejection of surrender, and yet they had not fled. Their scattered fleet elements remained in position throughout the solar system, apparently waiting for the inevitable attack. Status report, Zarthul commanded, his crystalline voice echoing through the bridge. Human fleet deployment remains unchanged, reported his tactical officer, a reptilian whose scaled hands moved efficiently across holographic controls. 237 ships spread across 14 positions. No apparent retreat preparations. Are they perhaps attempting to evacuate their civilian population? Negative, Fleet Commander. Civilian traffic appears normal. No unusual movement patterns detected. Zarthul's form dimmed with puzzlement. In 3 millennia of pacification operations, he had never encountered a species that simply waited for annihilation. Usually primitive species either fled in panic or made desperate, futile gestures of defiance before inevitable collapse. Perhaps they are paralyzed by fear, suggested his operations officer, a floating gaseous being, whose thoughts manifested as shifting colored patterns in its containment field. Begin the demonstration, Zarthul decided. Target the outer defensive platform near their 6th planet. Minimal force. Once they see our capabilities, logic will overcome their primitive emotions. The massive hegemony fleet began its advance with the ponderous grace of beings who had never experienced real opposition. 800 ships moved in perfect formation, their various shield technologies creating a dazzling light show against the darkness of space. On Earth, Admiral Morrison watched the enemy advance from the underground command center. Around him, tactical displays showed the positions of every human ship, every defensive platform, every hidden weapons cache that humanity had prepared for this moment. First wave incoming, reported Commander Sarah Park from the Mars Defense Station. Count shows 50 hegemony ships breaking off from the main fleet. They're heading for Platform 6. Let them come, Morrison replied calmly. All units maintain positions. Do not engage until my signal. The hegemony ships approached Platform 6 with leisurely confidence. The massive orbital defense station appeared to be completely inert, its weapons powered down, its crew apparently resigned to destruction. Fleet Commander Zarthul watched his ships surround the human platform. Target the power core. Minimum yield. We want visible destruction but not total annihilation. The lead Zephyrian cruiser powered up its primary weapon, a crystalline array that could channel stellar energies. The weapon charged slowly, building to a brilliant crescendo that would easily destroy the primitive human structure. The beam lanced out across space, striking Platform 6 directly in its central hub. The expected explosion did not come. Instead, the human platform's shields absorbed the blast completely. Advanced deflector screens flared to life around the station, not only stopping the alien weapon but somehow storing its energy. Impossible, whispered Zarthul's tactical officer. Their shielding technology reads as primitive metal and ceramic composites. They cannot stop our weapons. Then why, Zarthul asked slowly, is their platform still intact? The answer came in the form of return fire. Platform 6's weapon systems came online all at once, revealing themselves to be far more advanced than their crude appearance suggested. High-energy particle beams, gravity-focused projectiles, and something the hegemony had never seen before, AI weapons, that somehow turned the stored energy from their own attack back against them. The lead Zephyrian cruiser simply disintegrated before the other hegemony ships could react. The rest of the human defensive network revealed itself. What had appeared to be 40 scattered defensive platforms were actually interconnected nodes in a vast weapons grid. Each platform was connected to the others through quantum entanglement communications, allowing them to coordinate their fire with perfect precision. All human units, Morrison's voice crackled across the communication network, commence Ghost Protocol. Throughout the solar system, human ships that had been waiting motionless suddenly vanished from alien sensors. Stealth technology that humanity had developed in secret activated simultaneously across the entire fleet. Advanced chameleon hulls shifted to match the background radiation of space, while sophisticated jamming systems created false sensor readings. The hegemony fleet found themselves facing an enemy that had simply disappeared. Where are they? Zarthul demanded, his crystalline form blazing with frustrated energy. Find them! His answer came from above, below, and all sides at once. Human ships materialized out of apparent empty space, having used the same gravitational distortions that powered their faster-than-light drives to hide behind bent space itself. They emerged not in formation like civilized species, but as individual hunters striking from perfect ambush positions. The first hegemony ships to die never saw what killed them. Human vessels designed specifically for war struck like sharks, targeting engines and command centers with surgical precision before vanishing back into stealth mode. These were not the exploration ships the aliens had observed, but purpose-built warships that had been hidden throughout the outer system. They're inside our formation, shouted the operations officer as another 3 hegemony ships exploded. How are they moving through our shields? Zarthul stared at the tactical display in growing horror. Human ships were not just attacking from outside Burr. They were somehow appearing inside the hegemony formation itself, striking vital targets and disappearing before return fire could be coordinated. The truth was even worse than he realized. Humanity had spent decades studying captured alien technology from crashed probes and diplomatic missions. They had learned to mimic hegemony identification signals, allowing their ships to pass through alien shields as if they belonged to the fleet. Fleet Commander? The tactical officer's voice was tight with panic. We're reading massive energy signatures throughout the asteroid belt. Something is happening. The asteroid belt erupted. What the hegemony had assumed were normal space rocks revealed themselves to be hollowed-out weapons platforms, each one stuffed with enough firepower to destroy a moon. Humanity had spent 50 years secretly converting asteroids into mobile weapon systems, creating a hidden defensive network that spanned the entire solar system. Thousands of rock-disguised missiles launched simultaneously, their simple chemical rockets accelerating them to significant fractions of light speed. The hegemony's advanced sensors, designed to detect sophisticated energy signatures, completely missed the primitive but effective kinetic projectiles until it was too late. "Energy shields up," Zarthul commanded desperately. The shields did nothing. Humanity's kinetic weapons were specifically designed to penetrate energy barriers through simple mass and velocity. Rocks moving at 30% of light speed cared nothing for sophisticated deflector technology. Hegemony ships began dying in massive explosions as relativistic projectiles tore through their hulls. The aliens' advanced armor, designed to resist energy weapons and exotic particles, crumpled like paper before the simple physics of high-velocity matter. "This is not how primitive species fight." Zarthul's voice carried undertones of panic. "Where are their honor codes? Their rules of engagement? They strike from hiding like cowards." From his position on Earth, Admiral Morrison smiled grimly as he watched the alien fleet's formations disintegrate under human attacks. "You wanted to see how humans fight," he murmured. "We don't fight for honor. We don't fight for glory. We fight to win." The Hegemony fleet, which had approached expecting an easy demonstration of superior firepower, found themselves trapped in a carefully orchestrated killing field. Human forces struck from every angle using tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare the aliens understood. Stealth ships materialized long enough to launch attacks before vanishing again. Disguise platforms revealed devastating weapons arrays. Seemingly harmless debris fields exploded into clouds of guided projectiles. And through it all, the human defensive platforms maintained their interconnected fire, using quantum-entangled targeting systems to coordinate attacks across light minutes of space with perfect timing. "Fleet Commander." The tactical officer's voice was breaking. "We're down to 600 ships. Request permission to withdraw." Zarthul's crystalline form had dimmed to a barely visible glow. In 30 minutes of combat, the mighty Hegemony fleet had lost nearly 200 ships to an enemy they had dismissed as primitive. Their advanced weapons were being countered by simple physics. Their sophisticated tactics were being overwhelmed by ruthless pragmatism. "Send a message to the Hegemony High Command," he ordered, his voice hollow with defeat. "Inform them that initial pacification has failed. The humans are not a primitive species. They are—" He paused, searching for words to describe what he had witnessed. "They are weapons." As the Hegemony fleet began its retreat toward the outer system, human ships pursued them like wolves harrying a wounded mammoth. The message would reach Hegemony space in 3 weeks. In those 3 weeks, the galaxy would learn that the easy conquest they had expected was about to become the bloodiest war in galactic history. And in the depths of space, Admiral Morrison was already planning humanity's next move. The aliens had made a fundamental error. They had assumed the Hegemony High Command received Fleet Commander Zarthul's report in stunned silence. For the first time in 3,000 years, a pacification fleet had been forced to retreat. The impossible had happened. A primitive species had not only resisted, but had inflicted devastating casualties on the galaxy's most advanced military force. High Archon Veltar, the supreme leader of the Zephyrian Empire and head of the Hegemony Council, studied the tactical data with growing disbelief. The holographic display showed the aftermath of what should have been a simple demonstration of power. Instead, it looked like a massacre. "Explain to me," Veltar said, his crystalline voice carrying dangerous harmonics, "how 800 ships were defeated by 200 primitive vessels." The assembled military commanders shifted uncomfortably. General Crotha of the Reptilian Dominion was the first to speak. "The humans employed deception on a scale we have never encountered. They disguised weapons platforms as natural objects. They used stealth technology we cannot detect. They violated every principle of civilized warfare. They cheated," added Admiral Gespoy of the Gaseous Collective, its form flickering with agitated colors. "No honorable species fights from hiding. No civilized being strikes without warning. They are barbarians." Veltar's form brightened with irritation. "Barbarians who destroyed a quarter of our pacification fleet in less than an hour. Barbarians who forced the remainder to retreat. These are not the actions of primitives." A new voice entered the chamber as the holographic form of Fleet Commander Zarthul materialized. The officer's crystalline structure was visibly damaged, cracks running through what had once been perfect geometric patterns. "High Archon," Zarthul began, "I must respectfully disagree with my colleagues. The humans are not barbarians. They are something far more dangerous." "Explain." "They are a warrior species that has perfected the art of warfare over millions of years of evolution. Every tactic they employed showed sophisticated understanding of military principles. Their deception was not primitive cunning. It was advanced psychological warfare. Their stealth technology is beyond our current capabilities. Their coordination across light minutes of space suggests quantum-entangled communication networks. General Crotha hissed dismissively. You make excuses for defeat, Fleet Commander? I report facts, Zarthel replied coldly. Fact. They neutralized our energy weapons with defensive systems that turned our own firepower against us. Fact. They penetrated our formations using duplicated identification codes, suggesting they have been studying our technology for decades. Fact. They employed kinetic weapons moving at significant fractions of light speed, bypassing our energy shields entirely. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Finally, Veltar spoke. What do you recommend? Full mobilization. Deploy the entire hegemony fleet. Treat this not as a pacification operation, but as a war against a peer-level threat. Admiral Gessapoy's gaseous form pulsed with outrage. A peer-level threat? They are one species scattered across a few dozen worlds. We represent 12 civilizations controlling thousands of systems. Then why, Zarthel asked quietly, are they winning? Before anyone could answer, an urgent alarm filled the chamber. A communications officer materialized as a hologram, his form flickering with panic. Hi, Archon. We're receiving reports from the border sectors. Human ships have been detected in 17 different systems. They're attacking our outer colonies. The tactical display shifted to show a three-dimensional map of hegemony space. Red warning indicators were appearing throughout the outer rim, each one representing a human attack. As the assembled leaders watched in horror, more indicators continued to appear. Impossible, whispered General Crotha. Our intelligence reports showed they have only 200 ships. How can they be attacking so many targets simultaneously? The answer came from another communication burst. Hi, Archon. This is Defense Commander Lorvek at Kepler Station. We are under attack by human forces. But, sir, these aren't the same ships we observed in their home system. These are different vessels, larger, more heavily armed. There are hundreds of them. Veltar's form blazed with sudden understanding. They have a secondary fleet. We never detected their true military capability. The horrible truth was even worse than that. Humanity had not hidden a secondary fleet. They had hidden an entire military-industrial complex. For 50 years, while presenting a facade of peaceful exploration to alien observers, humanity had been secretly building warships in hidden shipyards throughout their territory. The mining operations on distant asteroids that aliens had dismissed as primitive resource gathering were actually massive manufacturing facilities. The research stations in remote systems were weapons development centers. The agricultural colonies were supply depots stocking military equipment. And now, with war declared, this hidden infrastructure had sprung into action. Human fleets emerged from concealment throughout their territory and immediately went on the offensive. But they did not fight like any civilized species the hegemony had ever encountered. They did not seek to capture territory or negotiate surrender. They sought total destruction of enemy capability. On the reptilian colony world of Sisakor, the human attack began without warning. Stealth ships appeared in orbit and immediately targeted not military installations but infrastructure, power plants, communication arrays, transportation hubs, manufacturing centers. Everything that kept a modern civilization functioning was systematically destroyed. When the reptilian defense force finally responded, they found themselves facing tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare. Human ships targeted rescue vessels attempting to aid damaged stations. They destroyed medical facilities. They used the refugees fleeing the bombardment as shields, knowing that reptilian honor codes prevented firing on their own civilians. They fight without honor, reported the reptilian commander as his forces were systematically eliminated. They show no mercy to the wounded. They ignore all protocols of civilized combat. The humans showed no mercy because they were not fighting for territory or political advantage. They were fighting for survival. In their minds, this was not a war between civilizations. It was an extermination attempt that required total response. On the gaseous collective's research station at Vega Prime, human forces employed psychological warfare on a scale the aliens had never imagined. They broadcast intercepted hegemony communications, showing the aliens' plans for human pacification, complete with discussions of population reduction, forced sterilization, and cultural destruction. The gaseous beings, who considered themselves highly evolved beyond such primitive emotions as fear, found themselves paralyzed by terror as they realized what the humans would do to anyone who threatened their species' existence. But it was on the Zephyrian trade hub of Crystal Station that humanity revealed the true depth of their military doctrine. The attack began with the appearance of a single human ship, apparently a diplomatic vessel requesting permission to dock. The Zephyrians, still clinging to civilized protocols, granted permission. The diplomatic ship entered the station's main bay and immediately detonated. It was not a suicide attack. It was a delivery system. The explosion released thousands of microscopic machines that immediately began replicating using the station's own materials. Within hours, the entire massive structure was consumed from within. Its sophisticated technology turned into raw materials for an ever-growing swarm of self-replicating human weapons. "High Archon," came the panicked report. "Crystal Station is gone. Not destroyed, converted. The humans have unleashed some form of technological plague. It's spreading to nearby installations." Veltar watched the report stream in with growing horror. In less than a week, the humans had crippled more hegemony installations than had been lost in the previous 1,000 years of expansion. They fought like nothing the galaxy had ever seen, utterly without restraint, completely without mercy, and with a level of technological sophistication that made a mockery of the hegemony's assumptions about primitive species. "Status report," he commanded. 47 installations destroyed or compromised, reported the communications officer. "Human forces continue to advance into our territory. Our defensive fleets are being systematically eliminated." "What about our attempts to negotiate?" "The humans are not responding to any diplomatic overtures. They appear to have no interest in territorial gains or political settlements. They seem focused entirely on eliminating our military capability." General Crotha leaned forward, his scaled face grim. "High Archon, we must face the truth. We are not fighting a pacification campaign against primitives. We are fighting a war against the most sophisticated military force the galaxy has ever produced." Admiral Gesipoy's gaseous form had dimmed to a barely visible wisp. "They're not trying to conquer us. They're trying to eliminate us as a threat. Permanently." Veltar studied the tactical displays showing human forces advancing deeper into hegemony space with ruthless efficiency. Each attack was perfectly coordinated, each target precisely chosen for maximum strategic impact. The humans fought with the cold precision of apex predator. The war lasted 18 months. When it ended, the Zephyrian hegemony no longer existed. Neither did the Reptilian Dominion, the Gaseous Collective, or 9 other civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for 3 millennia. Their fleets were destroyed, their governments dissolved, their military infrastructure reduced to floating debris. Admiral Morrison stood on the observation deck of the UES Indomitable, humanity's newest dreadnought, watching the construction of New Geneva Station in what had once been the heart of hegemony space. The massive structure was being built not as a military base, but as a diplomatic center, humanity's first attempt at establishing peaceful contact with the dozens of species that had been freed from hegemony rule. "Final casualty reports," said Captain Elena Vasquez, approaching with a data pad. Morrison noticed that she wore the insignia of the new Galactic Affairs Division. See humanity's attempt to manage relationships with the bewildering variety of alien species they had inadvertently liberated. "Our losses? Surprisingly light. 14 ships destroyed, 47 damaged, 3,200 casualties total." Elena paused, studying the numbers. "Considering we just fought a galaxy-wide war, those figures are almost unbelievable." Morrison nodded grimly. The low casualties had not been due to luck or enemy restraint. They had been the result of humanity's approach to warfare, our strike first, strike hard, eliminate the enemy's ability to fight back before they could inflict significant damage in return. What about the hegemony forces? Complete military defeat. Their entire fleet structure has been eliminated. Industrial capacity reduced to pre-spaceflight levels. Population centers intact but under military occupation. Elena's voice carried a note of concern. "Sir, some of the liberated species are asking questions about our ultimate intentions." "What kind of questions?" "They want to know if we're planning to establish our own hegemony, whether we intend to rule them the way the Zephyrians did." Morrison turned from the viewport to face his aide. "And what have you told them?" "The truth. That humanity has no interest in ruling other species. But sir, I'm not sure they believe us. They can't understand why we would fight a war and then not claim the territory we conquered. Morrison allowed himself a tired smile.
Have you explained the concept of leave us alone and we'll leave you alone?
Repeatedly. They seem to think it's some kind of trap. Before Morrison could respond, the ship's communication system activated. Admiral Morrison to the bridge. Priority communication from Earth. On the bridge, the main screen showed President Martinez in the newly renovated UN headquarters. Behind him, Morrison could see representatives from what appeared to be dozens of alien species. The beginning of humanity's attempt to establish some form of galactic government that didn't involve conquest. Admiral, the President began, I need to brief you on developments here. We've had delegations from 47 different species requesting meetings. They all seem to want the same thing, which is protection. They're asking humanity to guarantee their independence from any future hegemony attempts. Morrison frowned. Have we made it clear that we're not interested in establishing an empire? Constantly. But James, you need to understand something. These species have lived under the hegemony's rule for millennia. Some of them have forgotten how to govern themselves. Others never had the chance to develop independent institutions. They're not just asking for protection, Obras, they're asking for guidance. The implications of this were staggering. Humanity had fought a war to maintain their own independence, only to find themselves responsible for the independence of dozens of other species. What's the current proposal? The Terran Accords, Martinez replied. A mutual defense treaty that guarantees the independence of any species that signs on. No member can attack another member. No member can establish hegemony over another. And if any external force threatens a member species, all members respond. Morrison considered this. What makes this different from the old hegemony? Simple. Any member can leave at any time, for any reason with no consequences. And the treaty explicitly forbids any member from interfering in another member's internal affairs. It's not about control, it's about mutual protection. The communication paused as Martinez conferred with someone off-screen. When he returned, his expression was grave. James, we've received intelligence about something you need to know. Long-range sensors are detecting movement in the galactic core. Something big. Something that was apparently kept in check by the hegemony's military presence. What kind of something? We're not sure yet. But preliminary reports suggest there are species out there that make the hegemony look peaceful. The Zephyrians and their allies weren't just maintaining control. They were apparently serving as a barrier between the inner galaxy and something much worse. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. Are you telling me that by destroying the hegemony, we may have unleashed something even more dangerous? I'm telling you that the galaxy is apparently much more complicated than we realized. And like it or not, humanity seems to have become the default protectors of the species that can't protect themselves. The communication ended, leaving Morrison alone with the implications. Humanity had won the war, but victory had brought responsibilities they had never sought. They were now the dominant military power in known space, tasked with protecting dozens of species while facing potential threats from unknown civilizations in the galactic core. Captain Vasquez approached with another report. Sir, we're receiving a priority message from the Kepler Liberation Fleet. They've made contact with a species called the Valdec Empire. Apparently they were allies of the hegemony, and they're demanding that we return all conquered territory. What's our response? Admiral Chen is requesting instructions. The Valdec have a sizable fleet, and they're claiming that humanity has no legal right to the systems we currently occupy. Morrison studied the tactical displays showing human fleet positions throughout the former hegemony space. Humanity's ships were spread thin, maintaining order and providing protection to newly liberated worlds. A new conflict would strain their resources significantly. But as he considered the options, Morrison realized that the choice was simple. Humanity had not fought for territory or conquest. They had fought for the right to be left alone, and that right extended to all the species that had asked for their protection. Send a message to this Valdec Empire, he ordered. Tell them that humanity recognizes their right to their own territory and their own sovereignty. In return, we expect them to recognize the same rights for the species under our protection. And if they refuse, Morrison's expression hardened. Then they will learn what the hegemony learned. Humanity doesn't fight for conquest. We don't fight for glory. We don't fight for territory. But we will fight and we will win, to protect anyone who asks for our help. 6 months later, the Valdec Empire signed the Terran Accords. Not because they wanted to, but because the alternative was the same fate that had befallen the hegemony. The galaxy had learned a simple lesson. Humanity could be peaceful, could be cooperative, could be reasonable. But they could not be conquered, could not be intimidated, and could not be stopped when they decided something needed to be done. The new galactic order was built on a foundation that previous civilizations had never understood. True strength came not from the power to conquer, but from the power to protect. And humanity, the species that had evolved from pack hunters, understood protection in a way that no other civilization ever had. They protected their own. And now, anyone who asked for it, anyone who agreed to live in peace, anyone who wanted nothing more than to be left alone to pursue their own destiny, they were part of the pack. The galaxy had challenged Earth expecting to find barbarians. Instead, they had found guardians, and the guardians were watching. As Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at a galaxy that was slowly learning to live in peace, he reflected on the irony of it all. Humanity had been called primitive, violent, and dangerous. The aliens had been right on all counts. What they had failed to understand was that those same qualities, are properly directed, could also make humanity the greatest force for peace and stability the galaxy had ever known. The pack had grown, and anyone who threatened the pack would learn what 10,000 years of evolutionary warfare could produce when applied with modern technology and unshakable determination. The galaxy was at peace, and it would stay that way, because humanity was watching.